Victoria Mitchell was a corporate lawyer, a mother of 2 teenagers, and the wife of James Sullivan, her true love. She was also an exceptionally attractive woman. At 42, she had dark hair, dark eyes, a slender figure, and a captivating smile. She was highly intelligent with an intuitive understanding of people. But now, as she sat at the banquet table, her marriage and family were in grave danger. All because of herself, her husband Jim, and her client Alexander Whitmore. Alex, Jim, and Tori glared at each other with palpable tension. The conflict had erupted because Alex wanted to spend the weekend with her, while Jim would be with Alex's companion, the young and beautiful Carmen. In fact, before she witnessed Jim's reaction to Alex's proposal, she had been looking forward to a break from her marriage. It seemed so simple. Alexander Whitmore was incredibly attractive to her, so much so that she was willing to let Jim be with Carmen. This whole situation had started a few months ago when Alex was sued by a major construction firm. He approached their firm for representation, and the partners assigned her to handle the case. They worked on the case together with others from his company and her firm, but the 2 main participants grew closer. They started having dinners without others present. They began discussing more personal matters at these dinners. They started staying late for meetings where they shared more of their life stories. Tori was well aware that she was in danger of breaking her marriage vows because of her attraction to Alex. He was single and known to be quite the charmer. As his business partner Rebecca Hayes had mentioned, he was more imposing than Jim and more polished too. Jim had some rough edges from his working-class background. After some late-night meetings, she knew she wanted to explore something with Alex to test the waters, so to speak. Work on the case intensified. There were settlement offers and extensive discovery requests. As the case escalated, so did the relationship between Alex and Tori. Now he openly pursued her when they were alone. She allowed him a kiss or an embrace but resisted going further, despite her strong desire. She was a woman who didn't hide the truth from herself, so she knew what she wanted. She just didn't know how to get it without destroying her life. One evening during a late meeting, Alex suggested they take a couple of hours and go to his hotel room. Tori immediately rejected the offer. She was tempted, but she wasn't inclined to cheat on Jim. It was mainly a matter of honesty and honor on her part, but she admitted to herself it was also because her husband was so perceptive. She had the feeling that Jim would figure out if she slept with Alex as soon as it happened, and that would be the end for her and Jim. Tori told Alex this before they parted that evening. Then their first real kiss happened, and Tori was left confused by this. After this, the relationship between them cooled slightly, but not for long. Negotiations for a settlement were nearing completion. Tori outmaneuvered the opposing party by demanding additional, more specific discovery requests. Ones that showed the case would be examined with full transparency. Nothing would be hidden. As a result, the case was settled on terms very favorable to Alex. After signing the paperwork and filing it, Alex invited Tori to an early dinner to celebrate. His idea of celebration included the removal of clothing. Tori said no. It wasn't exactly a firm no. Really deadass. They walked to Tori's car parked outside the restaurant. Alex said, "I have a proposal." Tori smiled. "I know you just made it, and I just said no." Alex said, "I'm being honored at a charity gala next Friday here in town. I'm inviting you and Jim. I'll have a very beautiful young woman with me. We've been close for a long time." Tori frowned. "What do you mean, Alex?" "At some point this evening, I'll make a trade with Jim. He gets Carmen, and I get you for the weekend." Oh God. At this moment, Tori lost some of her confidence and composure. She was genuinely embarrassed. "Do you think he'll agree?" Alex was confident. "No, maybe not. Probably not." Alex pulled her toward him and kissed her. He said, "I'll send you an invitation. You and Jim can sit at the main table with me and Carmen. There'll be dancing. Carmen is a professional dancer. She'll be a great partner for Jim." Tori said, "We'd be happy to come to dinner, of course." As for the sharing, don't do anything until we discuss it further. Maybe when we see how dinner goes. Okay. But Tori, I assure you that if we do this, you'll have an amazing time. She got into the car and drove away, knowing full well that Alex's statement was true. That evening, she told Jim about the settlement and the Friday night gala. Jim said, "Does this mean Alex is interested in you?" Jim's radar went into overdrive at those words, but he didn't say anything more. Jim was a successful businessman who owned 4 auto repair shops across the Chicago suburbs. He had built the business from a single garage over 15 years, specializing in European car repairs and custom modifications. The shops were profitable enough that he could manage them mostly from home, writing technical repair manuals for auto manufacturers and running the business side while his skilled mechanics handled the day-to-day operations. His income from the shops and consulting work was substantial, nearly matching Tori's salary at the big law firm, which meant money was rarely a concern for their family. His work was mainly done from home, allowing him to be close to his 2 children, Emma, 18, and Tyler, 16. He had been a hands-on dad since they were little. There were times when he had to travel to the shops to handle major issues or meet with suppliers and potential franchise partners, and just recently he had to travel to Los Angeles to consult on a documentary about small business success. Mostly, however, he got his children to school and worked from his home office. Jim was able to balance work and family because he was an extremely observant person who could analyze mechanical problems in detail. His diagnostic skills, honed from years of troubleshooting complex automotive issues, extended to reading people and situations. He could spot problems before they became major breakdowns, whether in an engine or in his family dynamics. This quality bothered Tori. When she refused Alex's offer of a quickie, Jim never turned off this analytical gaze at the people around him, including her and the children. Many times he noticed something in the children that helped prevent problems, like when Tyler started hanging around with the wrong crowd, or when Emma was struggling with math but too proud to ask for help. The 2 children considered Jim to be some kind of mind reader. They knew they couldn't hide important things from him. So did Tori. The banquet in Alex's honor was a luxurious event at a luxurious location in downtown Chicago. The children went to Tori's parents for the weekend, which she thought left the weekend free for whatever arrangements might develop. Tori was very nervous when they arrived. She wanted what she wanted but was still uncertain about the proposed exchange. That uncertainty eased a little when she saw Carmen. Carmen was like a living dream. Tori noticed Jim's glances at her when they were introduced by Alex. This caused her to feel jealous and insecure. Maybe she shouldn't have risked letting Jim have Carmen. However, this thought distracted her from fully considering the main question of whether Jim would agree to the exchange. She skipped this analysis when jealousy overtook her. The 4 of them drank and talked at the head table with Alex's business partner Rebecca and her husband Rick. The dinner went well, and then Alex received his award with some speeches. Alex's speech was a small masterpiece, combining modesty with subtle self-congratulation. He received applause and returned to the table. Jim congratulated him, as did the others. The band then started playing, and after a few numbers where they danced with whoever brought them, Alex led Tori onto the dance floor. Tori was captivated by Alex now more than before. He was so smooth. Dancing with him, she realized how strong and athletic he was, and she was also aware of how excited he was about dancing with her. Tori didn't really notice that Jim and Carmen were still at the table. Alex whispered to her as they began their second dance, "Are we agreed? Can I make the proposal after this song?" Tori said, "Yes. Yes, do it." She was beyond worried that Carmen would steal her man. When they returned to the table, Tori noticed that Jim and Carmen didn't seem to be connecting. Alex asked Jim about it, and Jim said he'd been watching them dance. He looked straight at Tori. Tori was ready to call Alex off, but he said, "Jim, Tori and I have been working closely together these past few months. I hope she and I can spend the weekend together. You and Carmen might enjoy each other's company too." Tori looked at her husband, but he only looked at Alex. There was a long pause. Then Jim said, "No." This was a decisive refusal, no explanation but quite definite. Perhaps even more than that. At this point, Tori's hope for a weekend with Alex was dashed. She knew this tone from her husband. She was ready to warn Alex, but Alex quickly persisted. He said, "Maybe you should ask Tori." Jim's response was quick and alarming. He said, "I'm not going to ask her, Alex. Our marriage is on shaky ground right now. She could easily push me over the edge with the wrong answer. That would be a shame. We have kids in high school." Alex said, "Well, I'll ask her. Tori, will you accept my offer?" Tori looked at Jim. There were no concessions at all. She knew she was in deep trouble. She stood up, refused Alex, and took Jim's hand as they left. Jim and Tori were silent during the ride home. Tori was scared and on the verge of tears. She knew full well that Jim was aware of the scheme, the conspiracy that she and Alex were trying to arrange at the gala. Jim had clearly avoided forcing Tori to say whether she supported the trade too early, but Tori knew that Jim was aware that she wanted this. She was afraid that such a realization could destroy them because, after all, it was a calculated attempt on her part to sleep with another man. Silence remained between them as they entered the house. Jim went upstairs and took a shower while Tori sat in the kitchen feeling dizzy. She looked around the house where she and Jim had been so happy raising their family. After a while, Tori thought about the evening. She thought about how Jim had avoided making her say outright that she wanted the exchange. She thought this might be his way of stopping their long slide toward divorce. If she had said it, it couldn't be ignored. Although they both knew she wanted the exchange, it wasn't openly on the table for both of them to see and discuss. She had no acceptable excuses, and the truth would be painful. She heard the shower stop. She waited, then went upstairs. Jim was wearing sweatpants and sneakers. He glanced at her and said, "I'm going for a run. I don't know why I took a shower." He slowly walked downstairs and left. Jim's detached behavior was alarming to Tori. She saw that he was not as calm about what was happening as he had seemed at the gala. She took a shower and waited for him to return. Took an hour. She was sitting on a chair in the corner of the bedroom, trying to read a book on her Kindle. It was a useless endeavor. The run had calmed Jim down. He had avoided directly acknowledging Tori's desire for Alex and her willingness to act on it. If she had ever spoken in favor of the proposed exchange, he would have left her alone at dinner and perhaps left her forever. This was something he couldn't tolerate. Tori should have known this after 20 years. In fact, he felt like she did know it, but she continued anyway. His efforts to prevent her from openly disrespecting him had now left the whole situation in a precarious state. He decided to leave everything as it was and see what happened next. He thought it would be nice to have some kind of explanation for her behavior, but he didn't really need it. She was so consumed by passion for this guy that she had lost her bearings. Perhaps they should go to counseling. What would that accomplish if she didn't bring it up herself? He would give her time to think, but he would also start keeping a closer eye on her and her client. When he returned from his run, Tori was reading in the bedroom. Jim entered the house, turned off the downstairs lights, and went up to the bedroom. He undressed and went to take another shower. Coming out of the bathroom clean and silent, he pulled on his boxers and t-shirt and got into bed without saying a word. Soon Tori turned off the light and also went to bed. She didn't know whether to try to start a conversation. She decided not to. Her attempt to sleep finally succeeded several hours later. Jim got up early Saturday morning. He drove to his mother's house to pick up the kids and bought them breakfast at Denny's. His eldest, Emma, asked, "Where's Mom?" Jim's short answer was, "She didn't sleep well." Tyler, his 16-year-old son, asked, "How was the dinner dance?" Jim replied, "The music was okay, and so was the food." Both children saw that he was not in a good mood. They changed the topic to schoolwork. The drive home was fine because Jim relaxed a little, but both of his teenagers were wary when they arrived home. Tori woke up and found that Jim was not at home. No note. She assumed that he had gone to pick up the children. When she came downstairs, just dressed, the three entered through the front door. She watched everyone carefully to see if Jim had discussed the problem with Alex with them. She could see that maybe they weren't as happy as usual, but they weren't upset, so no, he hadn't. An awkward calm settled over the house. Emma and Tyler were both gone for the day. Jim busied himself with housework. Tori pretended to read. There was not a word between them. At dinner, they only said, "Please pass the salt." When it was bedtime for the adults, Jim went for a run again. He returned, took a shower, and went to bed, barely speaking to Tori. She asked him, "Did you have a good run?" He replied, "Yes," then rolled over to sleep. On Sunday morning, Tori tried to cuddle with Jim, but he got up as soon as she moved closer. He quickly got dressed and went downstairs. The children both left and didn't return. As they were leaving, Emma asked Tyler, "What do you think is going on?" "I don't know. Something about that dance party." Emma said, "Yeah, Mom must have done something." Tyler asked, "Wasn't it dinner for Mom's big client?" "Yes, but it's no use guessing. If this continues, we can ask them." "Yeah, maybe not," Emma thought. This might ruin everything. They each went their separate ways. Tori cooked Sunday dinner, good lasagna and cucumber salad. Both children ate the meal, but Jim barely touched his portion, leaving a lot on the plate. This was very unusual for him. He ate when he was hungry, and when he wasn't hungry, he did not eat. He watched a football game in the evening until late. Tori pretended to be asleep when he came upstairs. On Monday morning, after everyone had left for school and work, Jim called his friend Mason Donnelly, who was the manager at the hotel where the dinner was held and where Alex Whitmore was staying. The two had known each other since high school and sometimes met for beer. After some greetings, Jim asked Mason if Alex Whitmore was still staying at the hotel. Mason replied that he was booked for one more night and then would leave. Tori's commute to work was stressful. In fact, her tension was compounded by the fact that she had one last meeting scheduled with Alex and his business partner Rebecca. The meeting was supposed to wrap up everything. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Tori led them into the conference room. They discussed the details of the settlement and closed the matter. It took 20 minutes. Alex then asked, "Tori, are you okay after the gala?" Tori looked at Rebecca. Alex said, "She was there." Tori replied, No, maybe I'm not okay. My infatuation could cost me a lot." Alex frowned. "But nothing happened," he said. "I said no and you left. He knew that I wanted it and you know that. From the moment we left the gala until now, he hasn't said 10 words to me, hasn't touched me at all." Tori was apparently stoic. Alex said, "He'd be stupid if he gives up on you because of this. Even if we had that, he'd still be stupid if he gives up on you. Please call me. I don't want him to give up on me," she said. She shook hands with each of them and left the room. Rebecca looked at Alex and said, "So just the two of us for the evening?" He nodded. "I sent Carmen away. Looks like you'll be lonely again, Rebecca." Rebecca smiled. "Yes, I'll make it up to him later. He gets so excited." They returned to the hotel. Tori found it difficult to work that day. She gave up and went home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Jim was at home working on his laptop in the kitchen. He was reviewing repair estimates and scheduling for his shops. She looked in at him and then stood at the door. He didn't look up after the first glance. He then seemed to finish what he was reviewing and looked at her. She said, "I'm broken. Couldn't work. Whose fault is this?" "Mostly mine, I admit. I was afraid to say anything, but I need to apologize and find out where we are. The kids are worried. I'm worried. Is your friend Alex still in town?" "Yes. We had a short meeting this morning. I believe he's leaving tomorrow. He's a cocky jerk, full of himself. And you should have been full of him too." Torai spoke in a quiet voice. I said no when he suggested it, and secretly he convinced me that maybe you'd agree with Carmen. I should have known better. There was a long silence. Finally, Tori spoke. What can I do, Jim? He said. I'm not sure. Nothing specific comes to mind. She said. Everyone has their weak moments, Jim. He nodded. Torai knelt down in front of him. He was wearing his usual work jeans and a polo shirt, his standard uniform for working from home. He didn't resist when she reached for him. She guided him to the sofa across the room. Afterward, they lay on the sofa for some time. Then she got up and left the room. Dinner was reheated lasagna. Torai was in a much better mood. The children noticed this when they returned home. Jim had not yet emerged from his office. Torai sent Tyler to fetch him at 6:30. He knocked on the door and said, Dinner. Jim appeared and went down to the kitchen. Torai watched Jim closely as he entered the kitchen. She was surprised that he hadn't come earlier. The children also watched. Jim smiled at all of them and sat down to eat. He asked the children about school. He was talking to Tori about a project they were discussing, cleaning out the garage. The whole dinner went more normally than anything in days. The day ended with the kids going to their rooms and Tori and Jim cleaning up. Jim turned to her and said, Physical intimacy is good, but it's not enough. I understand that this guy was attractive. There have been a lot of attractive guys in your life, some probably much more attractive than him. Why now? We worked together for months. He worked on me for months. It built up. He wasn't subtle in the end, and by then I was vulnerable to him. I'm surprised you didn't go with him. He froze me too. I really wanted this, Jim, but it shocks me. Makes me feel second-rate if only it... Torai smiled at him. You're a wonderful husband, a fantastic father. You're not second-rate. That could mean a couple of things. You're the best, Jim, just not the best when it comes to... Carmen could rock your world. It doesn't mean we're each the only desirable people in the world. The thing is, you're the only woman I want in the world. She seemed to blossom when he said this, but she sank when he added, But I'm not that for you. I'm your long-term choice, and that guy was your short-term choice. She didn't deny it. She said, Well, I'll never know about him. He'd probably be a disappointment. I'll never know about any other guy but you. Jim nodded. He got up and went to the bedroom. Torai realized that she had a big job ahead of her. What Jim said was irrefutable. She wanted Alex more than Jim on the night of the party, at least. Maybe a few nights around it. Perhaps even at this very moment. Over the next few months, Tori worked hard to convince Jim that he was her one and only. In the end, it didn't work out the way she had hoped. They were intimate sometimes, really good intimacy sometimes, but he often seemed distracted, and lately Tori was becoming more and more irritated by this. The relationship never returned to what it was before the night of the trade proposal. Tori knew this. Jim knew this. One evening when he was alone at home, he tried to analyze the problem from a distance. What Tori did didn't seem so bad. She craved a man who, realistically speaking, was attractive. She hadn't cheated, but she wanted this guy so much that she was willing to risk her family to get him. No matter how he looked at it, the simple fact that his wife wanted another man more than him may have been the deciding factor. What he told her was true. There was no other woman who could make him feel the same way. At least he hadn't met one like this, and he had encountered some really attractive women, like the blonde nurse from their street. But he never even came close to cheating. He was rock solid about it. But now he felt that he would forever be the second choice for his own wife. This thought tormented him and bothered him more and more. He wondered if she thought about Alex when they were intimate. He assumed so. However, he put it aside and decided that he had to stay with her because his children would be hurt. Even though they were older, he had to hold out for a while. And he still received regular intimacy and companionship from Tori. Well, sort of. About 8 months after that evening at the banquet, Alex was due to come again. He found himself embroiled in a legal dispute, this time a challenge to one of his major construction projects. Tori had experience with construction law from college, making it right up her alley, and she had a previous relationship with the main character. One morning, the three main partners of her firm called her in, and Alex was there. Immediately she thought, this is the last thing I need. The three bosses of her firm were Abraham Allenson, Bartholomew Benson, and Caleb Carson. Of the three, Abraham knew her best and was aware of the problems she had with Alex and Jim due to the previous case. After some tense greetings, Abraham said, Tori, we are all aware of some possible difficulties for you, but Alex has serious business here, and he requested you to handle it. This is not unreasonable. This is a challenge to a major construction project. You have the technical knowledge, and he knows you. Tori said, Abe, I just can't do this. You might know why. I have a family, and I want to keep it. Alex entered the conversation. Tori, what happened before will not happen again. I promise you that. Tori shook her head. Even if I believed it, we would look at it differently. Bartholomew intervened. Tori, this is a big deal for the firm and for Alex. Millions are on the line. You need to pull yourself together and be strong. I'm sure Jim will understand. Tori looked at him. No, it's too much of a risk for me. Caleb said, it's a huge risk to abandon this job. Really, Jim will just have to be trusted. We're all adults, and Alex has assured us that he will refrain from any advances. Tori said, Jim and I are doing well financially. We don't desperately need my income. Still, I'll ask him about it. Alex said, if he objects, I can talk to him. Last time was good, but nothing really happened. I won't insist. I'm in trouble here. Tori was a ball of nerves that evening. She knew she had to wait until later in the evening to discuss this with Jim. Jim noticed her agitation when they were alone in the TV room. He asked, what's the matter with you? Tori said, Alex has a new case. They want me to do it. It's a construction project challenge, and I said no, but they insist. It would cost me my job if I refuse. Jim said, you know, a bachelor's degree in construction law doesn't mean that much. You'll still have to hire experts, right? Yes, but Alex is also educated in construction law, and I believe he insisted on me being on the team because he wouldn't have to pay someone else to train to understand him. He insisted on you because you were unfinished business to him. His ego is hurt. He will go after you. No. Maybe, but he has a very good non-romantic reason for me to lead our team. He says he won't act like he used to with me. He has a lot at stake. Me too. Tori, you don't believe yourself. It doesn't matter if he tries to get after you. I won't let it happen. Jim sat and was silent for a while. Then he shrugged. How much contact with him will this case involve? He and Rebecca have rented an apartment near the office. They'll basically be here for at least 6 weeks. Jim just looked at her. He then said, I'll leave it up to you. Maybe this is a chance to show me who's really number one. You know what's at stake. Tori nodded. I know. Jim got up and went to bed. Tori followed him a few minutes later. They settled into bed, and Tori stroked Jim's chest. She said, I need some reassurance. He gave it to her. It was tender but picked up intensity quickly and ended very well. Afterward, they both lay next to each other. Tori said, Thank you. There's nothing to be thankful for. It was a pleasure. They slept well. The next day, Tori decided to take over Alex's case. He and Rebecca attended a series of all-day meetings. Tori was assigned 2 assistants to the case, but neither of them had a background in construction law. The next day also saw a series of fairly intense meetings. They ended up hiring 2 experts to assess the situation. The meetings continued late into the night, and dinner was delivered to the law firm's office every night. Tori returned home between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, and by then she was exhausted. When they were in bed after the second night of work, Jim asked, Were there any problems? No, just too much to do. And Rebecca, her husband, doesn't seem to mind. I think, Tori replied. Jim said, she told me it turned him on. She tried to convince me about you and Alex. I put her in her place. I really don't understand all this nonsense. Rebecca owns it. That's what she told me. There's no way I would want a marriage like that, Tori said. You don't have to worry about it. That's not what's bothering me, Jim. If I sense any danger, I'll tell you when we can talk, but I don't think that's going to happen, Tori said. The intensity of work decreased after the first 2 days. Tori assigned her team to their tasks of basic legal research. Alex and Tori then held various discussions with their experts. After 2 weeks, Tori was pretty sure Alex wouldn't be a problem. She told Jim about this, but he wasn't convinced. Every evening when she returned home, he watched her carefully, and in bed, Tori and he got along better. More effort on her part caused more on his part. But Jim still wasn't convinced. If anything, Tori's efforts gave him more doubts. She spent more time with Alex than with her own husband, but he was sure that she had not entered into a romantic relationship with Alex yet. He thought it would happen at some point. She wanted it again. There was something about the way they worked together that caused her reaction last time. There was also some special attraction between them. Now she had been warned. He thought, however, that it might take her by surprise, and that would be such a shame. One evening, about 4 weeks into the case, after Alex had returned from a business trip to Milwaukee where he had been away for several days, Tori came home energized. The children were both at a neighbor's for dinner. Tori took one look at Jim and led him to the bedroom. She was like a force of nature. It lasted a long time because Jim made it last. It was a really challenging task, but worth it. Both exhausted, they lay recovering. Jim turned to Tori. I guess I can thank Alex for that. Tori sighed. Yes. What are you going to do? What have you done? Jim asked. Didn't do anything. He didn't really try, not openly, Tori explained. I mean, he didn't insist, but small touches, indirectly suggestive comments. Jim said, kisses and hugs? No, damn it. I guess I should be grateful that you brought this home. Yes, but for how long? I admit this is becoming a risk. I must complete this part of the matter, the training of experts. I really don't understand what's going on with this whole situation. He's not more attractive than other guys who have been courting you. Jim said, not for me. Him and you. Pause. That is, you and him. Tori said, Jim. Jim rolled over, trying to sleep. It was not so easy. Tori immediately fell asleep. In the morning, Jim stopped Tori on her way to the door to work. He said, if you give in, if he tries and wins, he's a dead man. It doesn't matter how rich he is. Tell him. Tori was shocked. Jim said this while looking at her with a firm gaze. She was left speechless. He patted her on the cheek and said, so you both know what's at stake. I'll do the time if I have to. Then he turned back into the house, sat back down to breakfast, and finished his eggs. He walked the children to school and sat down to think. He had a plan of sorts. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. But as Jim sat in his home office that morning, staring at his laptop screen, he realized he already had a different kind of plan forming. Over the years, he had built relationships with suppliers, contractors, and business partners throughout the Midwest. The auto repair industry was more connected than most people realized. If Alex Whitmore wanted to play games with his family, Jim could play a different kind of game entirely. Tori drove to work in a state of mild shock. She tried to rationalize Jim's threat, tried to believe that he didn't mean it or that he wouldn't do it, but she saw him and heard him. She needed to complete the next 2 weeks with Alex before she could turn the case over to other lawyers, and she had to do it without any incidents. When she arrived at the office, she drank coffee and reviewed the latest materials from the experts. Alex and Rebecca arrived at 10 o'clock and brought with them Jonathan Crisp, one of the expert construction consultants. He brought his Apple laptop. The four gathered in the large conference room they had been assigned for the case. The meeting lasted about an hour. When they took a break, Tori went to her office. but Alex followed her and closed the door behind him. "What's happening to you?" he asked. She replied, "Jim is very worried about this situation. I tried to soften it, you know. I told him that you were not making advances toward me." "Well, that's mostly true." "That's not true at all, Alex. You're just skirting around the edges. But I know your purpose." Alex smiled. "We have chemistry." She laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Yes, I know. Yesterday I almost jumped on Jim as soon as I got home. He should be grateful. Better living through chemistry." He had a smirk. Tori said, "He won't kill me, Alex. Just you. Is it worth dying for?" Alex froze. "Maybe it's worth it." Tori said, "The point I'm making is that Jim has his own inner demons. Slow but sure. He meant what he said, and what's more, he's capable of getting away with it." At that moment, Rebecca knocked, and they returned to their meeting. Meanwhile, Jim was making phone calls. First to his friend Danny Martinez, who ran a steel supply company that serviced construction projects throughout the Midwest. Then to Bill Chun, who managed a concrete operation. After that, he called Mike Kowalski, who owned the largest crane rental service in the region. The conversations were casual, friendly. Jim mentioned that he'd heard through the grapevine that Alexander Whitmore's company might be having some financial difficulties. Had they heard anything? Were their accounts with him current? Maybe they should be extra cautious about extending credit. Jim didn't lie. He simply shared his concerns about Alex's stability, mentioned the lawsuit, and suggested that his friends might want to check their exposure. In the construction business, word traveled fast, and cash flow was everything. Jim didn't know if his threat would work. He meant it in an abstract sense. He knew that sooner or later, if Alex slept with Tori, he would hurt him and possibly divorce her. He thought about their conversations about Alex. It was strange for him to watch her vulnerability in front of Alex. She made it clear that she had never been so attracted to anyone other than Alex in her life. Perhaps not even to her husband. Was it really her fault? She seemed overwhelmed by the intense desire she felt for this man. It was as if she had met the man she was meant to be with, at least physically. Jim decided that if his direct threat didn't work, he probably wouldn't physically harm Alex. But he also decided that he was done being his own wife's second choice. If they completed the case without further incident and Alex returned home, Jim wasn't sure he could continue the marriage. If Tori gave in, he would never touch her again. But now he had another option, one that appealed to his analytical, business-minded approach to problems. If Alex wanted to destroy his family, Jim could systematically destroy Alex's livelihood. When Tori arrived home on time that evening, the family was having dinner together, dinner prepared by Jim. Tori was relieved that Jim seemed calm. They watched a basketball game and went to bed. Jim asked, "How was your day? Did you talk to Alex?" "I told you I conveyed to him your attitude toward him. After that, there were no problems," Tori replied. "Okay, but it's all on you. Regardless of what I say, he'll probably continue once he gets comfortable." "We'll see," Tori said. "What do you mean, we'll see? If he's not next to me, he won't be a problem." Jim looked at her seriously. "I feel like reheated leftovers, and he feels like a 5-star meal." She laughed at him. "I'm not a gourmet. I like your cooking, even if it's leftovers." She rushed at him and climbed onto his lap. He tried to put up some resistance, but it was like a sandcastle before a tsunami, although it was nice to be swept away. For her part, Tori had treasured their intimate moments ever since the Alex situation arose. That night she was with Jim while thinking of Alex. They both knew what she really wanted, and both were concerned about this in different ways. Jim felt excluded, and Tori was afraid for her future. They never broke the impasse caused by the trade proposal. They might never emerge from it. She never lied to him about how he was only second in her desires. If it was no use, she simply consoled them by being intimate with him when he seemed depressed about it. The next few days at work were very stressful for Tori. They were preparing for the experts' depositions now that they had expert reports from the other side. Tori worked all day Saturday as Jonathan Crisp was busy preparing for next week's hearings in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was scheduled to fly to Grand Rapids on Sunday. He had a room in nearby Holland on Lake Michigan. The team of construction experts completed their work the following Thursday morning. From now until the trial in Detroit, Tori and Alex were able to work by phone or Skype if necessary. Over the course of the week, Alex subtly ramped up his seduction campaign despite Tori's warning, but Tori was on guard against his techniques. That didn't mean she was safe. The techniques excited her toward him, and she brought it home. Jim was obviously aware of Tori's growing passion. Meanwhile, Jim's quiet campaign was beginning to show results. Danny Martinez had called 3 other steel suppliers, casually mentioning his conversation with Jim. Bill Chun had done the same with concrete suppliers. Word was spreading that Alex Whitmore might be a credit risk. When Alex tried to order materials for his next major project, he found that suppliers who had always extended him credit were now demanding cash up front. His business line of credit, which had been automatically renewed for years, was suddenly under review. Small problems that he would normally handle with a phone call now required extensive documentation and higher deposits. Alex didn't immediately connect these problems to his pursuit of Tori, but he was beginning to feel pressure. One morning at breakfast, Emma said, "You're keeping us up late at night." Tori replied, "We'll get some noise suppressors." Tyler added, "I already tried them, but they're uncomfortable." Tori said, "Earplugs. It's not our fault, really. They left it like that." Alex invited Tori to lunch on Thursday. He was flying to Detroit on Friday morning. A preliminary hearing was scheduled to take place next week in U.S. District Court. Tori didn't need to be present. Alex took Tori to a nice restaurant near his apartment. Neither Rebecca nor anyone else from the team was there. Tori was expecting this. She knew Alex would try to launch a full-scale attack. Normally she would prioritize caution over risk, but she knew she would have to participate in a trial in Detroit. A trial date had not yet been set, but it would be determined at the hearing. She would have to be in Detroit for 2 weeks, possibly including weekends. So she had to decide whether she should do it or quit. She saw this lunch as a test. Lunch was mostly pleasant. Alex made it clear that he wanted to eat and then go to the apartment for dessert. Tori refused politely. They ate and the food was good. Tori had a glass of wine, only one. At the end, Alex slid down the round bench and embraced Tori. Tori didn't move away. Alex ran his hand over her cheek. Tori looked him straight in the eyes. Never in her life had she wanted something so much and given up on it. So this was the first time. She slid out from under the bench, breathless. She said, "No, Alex." Alex was disappointed. "Not yet," he said, then waved for the bill. Tori went home. She entered the house and found Jim in his home office, reviewing supplier invoices on his laptop. "I need you," she said. They spent the evening together until the kids got home a little after 4. Tori felt like she had dodged a bullet or something similar in shape. The following week, a judge in Detroit set a trial for mid-June, 5 months from now. Tori thought it over. She had a meeting with the 3 partners about the case. She began by saying that she would not travel to Detroit for the trial. Abraham asked, "Why? You did a great job preparing. I'm guessing it's because of your husband's concerns, but nothing happened, right?" "True, but it was here when I came home every night. In Detroit, I'd be on his turf and Jim would be here." Caleb said, "Why don't you just, do it? I mean, if you were in Michigan, who would know? I would know. So would Jim too. Maybe not right away, but soon enough." Abraham said, "We sympathize, but I think we have to persist." Tori smiled. "Try to find someone else," she said, and got up and left the room. As she left, Abraham said, "She's got us stumped. At least we have time. Maybe we can arrange for her to be able to counsel. Maybe advise from here. Caleb said, "She's weak. I don't like weakness. Let's see if we can find someone as backup." That's what they tried to do over the following weeks. They interviewed 4 candidates, but none of them were suitable. They made an offer to a guy from a big New York firm who could handle it. He refused. Tori trained one of her assistants, Martin Blaine, so that he could cross-examine opposing experts and present their own. Meanwhile, Tori discussed the issue with Jim. He expected this. He was not stupid and knew that there would have to be a trial if the case was not settled. One night, Tori said, "There's probably going to be a trial in Detroit this year. They want me there," and I said no. They were looking for a replacement. So far, without success, and time is running out. Yes, if I insist, they'll probably fire me using the insubordination clause. You'll find something else. Maybe we'll write a technical manual together. Something about small business management in the automotive industry. She started laughing. A husband and wife team writing about business partnerships. That's either very fitting or very ironic. He laughed. Maybe with some real-world case studies. I wonder if the wife will listen to the husband's business advice. Of course she will. This is non-fiction, we have to be practical. What about you? Would you trust me to handle the legal aspects if you were expanding the business to Detroit? There's no expansion to Detroit right now. I'm not gonna lie, Tori. It's entirely possible I'd mess things up. But you know the lawsuit is intense, and maybe this will solve the problem. But probably not, right? I feel like I'm just running a small-time operation compared to your big law firm cases. Well, I'm not going, so that's it. I'm training Marty to handle the trial. He's smart. He and I can consult every evening on Skype. I'll have transcripts in the evening. Jim said, "I think you'll always resent me and blame me. That's not a good basis for continuing a relationship." Tori said, "I love you. Only you. That's enough, I hope." That night, the two of them were passionate together. The children used earplugs, but they didn't help. As the trial approached, Tori spent more time at work. Emma graduated from high school as valedictorian and had already been accepted to Belmont College, 2 hours away from home in Indiana. She and Jim were busy preparing for her studies. Jim tried to stay strong even though it was hard for him. On June 1st, 10 days before the trial, Marty Blaine was hospitalized in Detroit with cardiac issues. Doctors explained his problem as the result of severe stress. He was banned from further participation in the trial. Tori's firm asked the judge to postpone the date, but this was rejected. The judge said ABC was a large firm with many lawyers. She knew that Tori had been involved in the interviews and preparations and was a senior lawyer. When they returned from court, the team broke the news. Abraham was sitting in his office with Tori. He relayed the news to her and said, "There's no choice now. And while I feel bad for Marty, I think you're better off for us. I've booked you a room at the Westin next to the court." Tori nodded. She knew she had little choice. If she had resigned, she could still have been subject to disciplinary action by the bar. Caleb had connections there. She went home to pack her things and try to calm down. She did her best. Jim helped her load the car and check the tires and oil. He then waved to her as she left for Detroit. As he walked back to the house, he estimated the chances of her faithfulness to be 50-50ths at best. He made some preparations just in case. In a way, he thought it would be a relief if she was unfaithful. Since the exchange proposal was made, their marriage had been on the decline. Most of their intimate moments were fueled by her passion for another man. Before the banquet, they were very close in many ways. They discussed their work, children, vacation plans, and other everyday things. They were interested in each other, but not so much lately. He missed this. He didn't know if it could be returned if it was lost. Later that day, he explained to Tyler and Emma about the court emergency. Emma's graduation ceremony was scheduled for Friday. The Detroit judge conducted trials 4 days a week and reserved Fridays for other business. It was the so-called garbage day, so perhaps Tori could return for the ceremony. Jim doubted it. Every evening, Tori called home and talked to Jim and the children. Usually the call came at 8 or later. She had a lot of work to do. Jury selection was scheduled for next Monday. Over the weekend, Tori called in the morning. The rest of her time was spent with jury selection consultants. Around 8 o'clock on Sunday, Jim asked her how things were going with Alex. "No problem, Jim. I'm just too busy, and so is he." "Is he involved in the preparations?" "Yes, I'd say he's involved, but..." Jim didn't find it funny, and Tori regretted making a joke. She said, "Sorry, there's nothing going on in that regard. We work in a common room at the hotel. I sleep on the floor above and he goes to his apartment. I haven't had any offers. Dinner is room service." But what Tori didn't know was that Alex was dealing with a growing crisis. His cash flow problems had accelerated dramatically. The trial was costing him a fortune, and now major suppliers were demanding immediate payment for materials already delivered. His bank had frozen his main business line of credit pending a full financial review. The jury was selected Monday, and opening statements were made. Tori didn't perform then, Jill Blandon did it. She had diagrams and exhibits prepared. On Tuesday, the plaintiff began making his case with 2 experts. The first one took all day. Tori conducted a slow, step-by-step cross-examination and made many good points. At the end of the day, she was satisfied, but she returned to the family room to prepare for the next one. It should have been the last, but now she had 2. When Tori returned to the room, Alex was already there. He was happy and excited about his day in court. As Tori dropped off her briefcase, Alex pulled her into a big hug and spun her around. She said, "Whoa, big boy, don't celebrate until you're across the finish line." Alex said, "You were wonderful, Tori. Just fantastic. Thanks. Now I need to eat. Get ready a little. Then try to get a good night's sleep." Alex didn't make any moves on her, but he said, "When we win this case, I will take you to my place and make you so happy." Tori simply shook her head and began reading her notes for the next witness. She ate, then went to her room and slept. The next day, Wednesday, went even better than the first. Tori methodically worked through the plaintiff's case using their own expert. The guy resisted to the end, but it was a losing battle for him. This testimony was followed by 2 brief witnesses. The plaintiff concluded, and the judge denied the defendant's motion for judgment. When Tori returned to the room, Alex was there again, and no one else was. Her experts were due to arrive at 7 for the final run-through. Alex walked slowly toward Tori. As they stood face to face, this time his hug was soft and sensual, and he kissed Tori. She reciprocated his feelings. Just as things were about to heat up even more, the door opened, and Jill Blandon walked in. As Tori and Alex separated, the dinner delivery service also arrived. Alex left, and Tori briefly prepared both witnesses. At 10, she went to her room and called home. The next morning, when the team arrived at court, Herman Billings, the plaintiff's attorney, asked to see them. Alex, Jill, and Tori entered the waiting room with him and the main client, CEO Morgan Thompson. Thompson wanted to settle. Billings offered a proposal. Jill immediately made a counteroffer. She had worked on it for a week. There were several rounds of bidding, but ABC had Alex in a very strong position. By 11 o'clock, an agreement was reached that was very beneficial for Alex. The parties drafted it and went to court. The agreement was filed, and the jury was sent home. That afternoon, some details were decided, and everyone was free. Tori was exhausted. She returned to the hotel to her room and slept for an hour. Then she got up and took a shower. Alex invited everyone to dinner at a club near his condo. Limousines were ordered for everyone. Tori called home with the news. She promised to leave Detroit on Friday afternoon but would miss the morning graduation ceremony. Jim was not happy about this. The dinner arrangements were also not very pleasing to him. He said, "Tori, this is probably when you're most vulnerable. I know, Jim. I can handle it. Okay. Congratulations. Don't have too much fun. The club was a place for dinner and dancing. They were a party of 6. Alex, Tori, Jill, Jonathan Crisp, and 2 other ABC lawyers, Ellie Mason and Mickey Diameter. They were taken in a limousine, and Alex met them at their table. The food was great, as was the wine. The dancing started at 9. Alex immediately invited Tori. Tori had some wine with dinner and agreed to dance with Alex, although she thought to herself that it was dancing that started her marital problems. Jill and Jonathan danced too, as did Ellie and Mickey. The other 2 pairs sometimes switched partners, but Alex and Tori danced 6 dances in a row, some fast, 3 slow. The slow dance at the end of this episode put Tori in a difficult position. She later recalled thinking that she was 4 hours away from home, and Jim would not be able to find out. Alex whispered to her as they danced, "Now you're coming to me. It's now or never. You're going to have the time of your life." Tori said, "Just this once, Alex. No one needs to know." Alex thought that she wanted him so badly that she simply forgot about the 3 lawyers from her firm who knew very well what was going on. She allowed Alex to lead her out of the place and across the street to his condo. As they walked through the door, Alex turned her toward him and pressed her against the wall. He started with a deep kiss, which she returned. Alex took her hand and led her into the bedroom, where the bed was already made in anticipation. When it was over, she lay close to him. Minutes passed. Alex said, "I've never experienced anything like this." "Never." She murmured something and then said, "Me too. Perhaps no one ever." An hour later, they were together again. When they were done this time, they took a shower and ate something, shrimp, a little celery, and apple slices. Then they returned to bed and made love slowly, face to face, looking at each other. Tori found it overwhelming. In the morning, they were still face to face. She separated and went to his bathroom, where she found a new toothbrush and brushed her teeth, then took a shower. She was hungry and tormented by guilt. He said, "Thank you for the whole night. It was amazing, the best." She said, "I should feel guilty, but no. It was so incredible. And the breakfast was great too." He took a shower while she got dressed. When he came out without clothes, she looked at him one last time. He was excited again. Then she left. She went to her hotel, checked out, and began heading back to Illinois. She loved Jim and hoped he would never find out about last night. She reminded herself to talk to the other 3 about keeping their mouths shut. Jim was worried about Thursday night's dinner. He could imagine how badly this could end. Bad for him and for the family. He called Tori's cell phone at 11. The call went to voicemail and he didn't leave a message. At midnight, he called the hotel and asked for her room. No answer. He did the same at 1:30, claiming it was an emergency. Then at 2:30, no answer. He gave up and tried to sleep. The graduation ceremony went well. Emma made a beautiful speech as valedictorian. Jim and Tyler were impressed and proud. Jim took them to lunch. Emma then went out partying, and Tyler went to his friend's house for the night. Jim was at home doing some errands. He had a training room in the basement with a heavy bag, an elliptical machine, and a bench press. There was also a small bathroom with a shower, a full-size refrigerator, and a kitchen sink. There was a small TV. He went to Walmart and bought a microwave and hot plate. He had just finished setting it all up when he heard a car in the driveway. He walked to the basement door into the backyard and up the outside stairs to the kitchen. Tori had just walked in through the front door. He heard her shout, "Honey, I'm home," like Ricky Ricardo. This showed him how nervous she was. He turned to her as she entered the room. He was leaning on the sink. She entered with a smile, which immediately disappeared when she saw his face. She sat down on the kitchen chair and looked at him. She said, "Damn," emotionless and humble. He said, "I called your hotel room last time at 2:30. Tori's hope of continuing the marriage ended at that moment. She said, "It was just one night. No love." No love. She was crying quietly. He fell silent. He said, "It doesn't matter. Maybe the memories will keep you warm at night, or maybe they will, but not me. Never again." She said, "I love you, Jim. I always will." She stood up and went upstairs, picking up her suitcase along the way. Jim headed back to the basement and finished his preparations to move in there for the next few months. He never returned from the basement that day, and she never came downstairs. He sat in his makeshift basement office and opened his laptop. He wasn't thinking about auto repair schedules or supplier contracts. Instead, he found himself planning for a future without Tori. He opened a spreadsheet and began calculating assets, cash flow, business valuations. He had been thinking about expanding to Detroit for years, maybe even selling the Chicago operations and starting fresh somewhere else. But first, he had some calls to make. If Alex thought he could destroy Jim's family without consequences, he was about to learn otherwise. He had always been good with numbers and logistics, skills that transferred well from diagnosing engine problems to diagnosing life problems. Just like with a damaged transmission, sometimes you could rebuild it, and sometimes you had to replace the whole unit. Over the next few weeks, Jim's systematic campaign against Alex's business intensified. He called in favors, shared concerns about Alex's financial stability, and leveraged every business relationship he had built over 15 years. The auto repair industry was surprisingly well connected to construction. Both relied on the same network of suppliers, contractors, and financial institutions. He then called his parents and informed them that he would be getting a divorce. He decided to let Tori tell her family herself. None of the children were at home. Emma had agreed to stay with her best friend after all the partying, but both were supposed to return home the next day, Saturday. Jim had already made arrangements with a lawyer to get a divorce if necessary, Zelda Morrison. The proposed agreement called for Jim to remain in the home with custody of Tyler. Emma was old enough to live independently without parental care. When Tyler graduates from school, the house will either be sold or one spouse will buy out the other's share. When the children returned home at lunchtime on Saturday, Tori greeted them. Then Jim came up from the basement. Both immediately realized that something was wrong. The four of them sat down at the kitchen table where they had shared so many meals. Jim said, "Your mom and I, well, we've come to the end of our marriage. We both still love you, but some things have happened." Tori was shocked. She had not had time to talk about all this with Jim, and although she was well aware that the marriage was in deep crisis, the suddenness of Jim's announcement stunned her. Both children turned to her. Emma asked, "What did you do, Mom?" Because of those sounds that we hear." Tori said, "I slept with a client in Detroit one night. Thursday." Tyler looked at his father and asked, "You're divorcing Mom?" Jim said, "Yes, but there's more to it than it seems. That one night, I don't know, it was hanging over me. Your mother knew it, and she did it anyway." Tori said, "It's hard." Jim said, "Not really, but for now I'll be sleeping in the basement. I'll still be working in my office. Maybe I'll be cooking. I don't know how that will work. There are details we need to discuss. I want to say that I'm very sorry that it came to this, but it did. There's no turning back." Tori left the table in tears. Both children turned to Jim. He said, She found it so important to be with this guy that she was ready to destroy the family. She fought it, she lost. But even if she hadn't given in to him, after she met him, nothing was the same for us." Emma asked, "What will she do? Will she live here?" "This all needs to be worked out, Emma. I'm so sorry this all happened on your special day, but I'm so proud of you and you, Tyler." They stood up and shared a group hug. Tori never came down while the kids were upstairs. When she ran upstairs, she fell on the bed and sobbed for a long time. How could she be so stupid and selfish? Her thoughts about the night with Alex seemed sour now, like spoiled milk. Every time she thought about it, she felt nauseous. Eventually, she smelled dinner. Looked like burgers. She was hungry, but she had no intention of going downstairs. Jim wondered as he prepared dinner whether Tori would be attracted to the smell. He thought not. He and the kids ate together. Everyone cleaned up after dinner together, and the children went up to their rooms. In fact, they were discussing the situation in Emma's room, but they could not come to any decisions. At 10 o'clock, Jim was sitting in the TV room waiting for Tori. She appeared and sat down opposite him. He turned off the baseball and looked at her. He said, "I'm sorry it all happened so quickly, but I didn't see the point in waiting. We're done. It's better to rip the bandage off right away." She said, "Maybe you should wait a little. It was just one night, Jim. All these years and just one night. Tori, you were warned multiple times. I mean, why should I think this would stop? You weren't even going to talk about it, and next time you might as well get away with it. Maybe you already have. No, it's not fair. These last few months, after the whole switching partners thing, I was living on the edge, and I was depressed because you clearly wanted him more than you wanted me. So you went and did it. But it wasn't a mistake. A stupid mistake. No, this was your chance at the ultimate pleasure, and perhaps I would never have known. Tell me, was it as great as you thought it was?" She didn't answer. She blushed and began to shed tears. He said, "So I can never compare with him, and I will never try. Marriage is not just about physical intimacy, that's a big part of it, and for us it's gone. So there's no marriage. I could make you happy. I always could, and you made me happy too. But you still went to him. Now you can have him as much as you want, but not me. Your choice is made." He stood up and went to his new sleeping place. Tori sat in the chair and continued to shed tears. Then she stood up and went to Emma's room. She knocked. Emma opened the door. Tori simply said, "I love you. I messed up, but I love you. I'm so sorry I missed your graduation speech." Emma hugged her but then said, "Mom, how could you do this to all of us? I don't understand." Tori said, "Me too, actually." Tyler left his room. He said, "Where is Daddy?" "Down in his sanctuary. I apologize to Emma. I apologize to you. I love you both. Never forget that. The next time will be difficult." She hugged them both and went to her room to cry even more. Tyler turned to Emma. "At least we can sleep better." He went to his room. When Jim went to the lawyer, she already had documents ready to sign. He signed them and they discussed how things could happen. She told him it might take longer if Tori resisted, and Tori was an outstanding attorney at an outstanding law firm. Jim shrugged. Zelda said, "I feel like it's all happening too fast. What happened will shock you, but initial reactions are often thoughtless." Jim said, "I've seen this coming for months, and I made it clear to her what was going to happen. She did it anyway, so it's happening now. I see no reason for a delay. The marriage is over. Okay, I can file electronically now and deliver it this afternoon. Sign here." Tori was in her office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She accepted congratulations from everyone without showing any visible reactions. When Abraham called her in before dinner, he asked, "What the hell, Tori? I mean, Jesus." Tori said, "I was weak to him. I told you all that. He had his way in the end and he won me over. Now I'll end up a lonely old woman." Abraham said, "I doubt it. You'll find another guy. Look at you. Not the one I love, Abe. Not Jim. Give him time. Maybe he'll listen to reason." She nodded, but she thought differently. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, her secretary brought a young man into her office, and he handed her the documents. She felt dead inside. Finally, she called Morris Sloan, the firm's family law specialist, and invited him to Abraham's office. She gave each of them copies of the documents. Abraham said, "Damn, that's fast." She said, "He already knew what was likely to happen." Morris read the documents. He said, "If the factual allegations are true, this seems fair. I understand that Jim was primarily a stay-at-home parent." "Yes, mostly. He works from home. You You have 20 days to respond. Do you want to fight? Even if you do, he might get a divorce. Let me think. I need time. Tori went home early. Jim was there, working on his laptop in the kitchen, reviewing parts orders and employee schedules. She looked in and said, "I'm home. I received the documents." Fine. He didn't even look up from his work. Tori knew that he was deliberately ignoring her, and she also knew that he was not as calm as he pretended to be. She turned to the kitchen. She thought about all the time they spent together and how well they knew each other. That's why she could read him. His shoulder twitched. She'd known this for years. The thought of losing such closeness was so depressing. She decided to drag out the process and waste as much time as possible. Perhaps Jim will cool down a little and start missing her. That was all she could think of. Jim couldn't work effectively after Tori returned home. He was nervous and did not concentrate. Every time he thought about his current situation, he imagined Tori with Alex, her face a picture of passionate delight. He decided that he needed to do something. There was one thing he had been working on. The business pressure campaign Jim had launched was reaching a crescendo. Alex's empire was crumbling faster than anyone expected. 3 major suppliers had cut off his credit entirely. His bank had called in his business loan for immediate repayment. 2 upcoming construction projects had been canceled when investors got nervous about his financial stability. But Jim wasn't finished yet. He had saved the most devastating move for last. Jim then went down to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. He prepared a dish with chicken, onions, and rice spicy. He liked this recipe. It smelled so wonderful when it was cooking. Tori came in and sat down at the kitchen table. She watched but did not speak. She saw Jim's shoulder begin to twitch. After a few minutes, he turned to her and said, "Cooking is harder when you're here. I'm sorry. I like the idea of returning to as normal a life as possible while all this is going on. The kids, Emma leaving. Until then, we probably won't get a divorce. I think we could sign the papers. You shouldn't have any trouble finding a place. I already have a place, same place as always. I like it there." There was quite a long pause. Jim was chopping garlic with his back to Tori. Then she said, "I'll say this once and I won't say it again. I made a very big, stupid mistake, a weak moment. All this time and then right at the end I messed everything up and ruined. Well, everything. If I could relive it, I would never do it." Jim said, "I won't be upstaged, Tori, and that's what you did. We've been together for so long. We know each other so well. Oh, I hate the idea of it all going away. I just hate it, and I hate myself for causing it." Her tears. Jim turned to look at her. Her tears were like a knife in his stomach. He slowly slid down the countertop to the floor. It was real pain. He leaned his back against the stove and began to cry, but he did not approach his wife. After all, she was the one who stuck that knife into him. Tori saw how much pain she had caused Jim. She saw this clearly and up close. She walked around the table to him, knelt down, and hugged him. She stroked his head, still crying. That's how Emma found them when she walked in through the patio door. First Jim, then Tori. They both rose to their feet as Emma began to cry. They approached her, acting as one, without hesitation. This went on for weeks. Attorney Tori responded to the lawsuit and asked for a consultation, but the answer did not deny the facts. Tyler went to football camp for 2 weeks, and Emma worked as a counselor at a nature camp in West Virginia, which left Tori and Jim alone. Jim was still cooking. Both worked, but there was almost no other contact. Absolutely no intimacy and no physical contact. The matter came to a hearing, and a consultation was scheduled. By this time, Tori was very upset by Jim's aloofness. He cooked and went down to his room. He was preparing breakfast, but when both kids left, he just made his own cereal. One surprising discovery was that neither of them felt romantic attraction to anyone. Jim was kind of dead in that sense. He hadn't met so many women in his daily life. Those he saw did not interest him. Tori had moments where she thought about trying to get Jim back all the way, but she knew him and understood that she would only make the situation worse. Over time, as he seemed disgusted by even the thought of her touch, she gradually lost hope that the marriage could be saved. That's where she was when they went to their first consultation appointment with Dr. Mary Stevens. Dr. Stevens was an attractive woman in her 50s who practiced in downtown Chicago. She asked them to write down in advance the basics of what happened and how they would like to move forward. Mary Stevens was not one to beat around the bush. She began the session by simply stating, "Both of you are deeply depressed. Tori is losing hope that the marriage can be saved and begins to shift, and Jim is tormented by the thought that he will never be able to satisfy his wife the way her lover can. The question is, what can be done?" Jim said, "I think we need to be apart now. I see her every day. It's torture for me." Tori looked at him. She said, "We had good intimacy before Alex, and even when I craved him, we still can." Mary asked, "But you understand that Jim just doesn't want to be compared and lose in comparison?" Tori said, "Intimacy is intimacy. There have been maybe 3 times in our marriage where he hasn't satisfied me." Jim said, "But not like Alex, right?" Mary and Jim looked at Tori. She said, "The night with Alex was great. He had the huge advantage of being new and different, and now Jim would have that. It's been so long." Jim said, "Don't be mean. Why didn't you go to him?" Tori said, "I try not to think about that night because I feel sick. I feel nauseous and have to distract myself." Mary asked, "Did you see Alex after that?" "No. He's been to our office twice, but I don't keep in touch with him. I'm warned when he comes, and I try not to even cross paths with him in the hallway." Mary asked, "Did you have any romantic desires other than for Alex?" "Not lately. At first, I wanted him to just take me, but now I know he won't do that, and I don't want anyone else. Now I don't even want him." Mary asked, "Jim, why didn't you try to reconnect intimately?" "Because I see them together in my head. We are destroyed." Mary asked, "Are you attracted to other women?" "No. Even the blonde neighbor who was attractive before, nothing. Just nothing." Over the weekend, Jim drove to Wisconsin to a rented cabin by a lake. He didn't take his laptop with him. Only a notepad and some technical manuals he'd been meaning to review. He'd been having trouble concentrating on business for the last few days. On Saturday morning, Jim drove to Detroit. He spent 8 hours there, mostly driving around, looking at commercial real estate and auto repair facilities. He took some notes about potential business opportunities. He spent Sunday at the cabin. Then he called home and told Tori that he would stay a few more days to think things through. On Monday, he went to Detroit again. He spent 10 hours there, meeting with a commercial real estate agent and visiting several auto repair shops that were for sale. He returned home on Tuesday afternoon. The trip helped a little with his focus. He had some clarity about his future business plans. He and Tori attended a second counseling session. Jim came in a better mood. He connected this with the trip to the cabin. Mary used to suggest medication for depression, but Jim just took a working vacation for himself. At the end of the session, Tori felt a little encouraged by Jim's improved mood, but she felt an underlying tension that made her uneasy. At home, he had shoulder tics, and during the session too. On Friday, Jim went to the cabin again. By then, Tyler had returned home to be with Tori. Jim went to Detroit again on Saturday and on Monday returned home on Tuesday. On Wednesday of that week, Tyler went to a nature camp where Emma was a counselor. Jim was working in his office when someone knocked on the door. It was his blonde neighbor, Samantha Rodriguez. She had lived next door for 6 years and was divorced from her husband after he had repeated affairs. She was 30 and beautiful, with a 7-year-old daughter who attended the local elementary school, Velma. She was with her father on summer holidays. Sam worked as a nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital on the day shift, which explained why she was sometimes home during the afternoon. She had recently taken some vacation days and was trying to spend more time at home before Velma started the new school year. Jim was surprised by Sam's appearance. She said, "Hi, Jim. I thought maybe you could look at my kitchen sink. I have a wrench." Sam was the opposite of Tori in many ways. She was blonde with fair skin, curvy, very beautiful, and young. She divorced her cheating husband 2 years ago, and over all these years and before, she felt drawn to Jim. He reminded her of her first boyfriend, and he was smart. Sam was no Einstein, but she liked smart guys. Now she saw the comings and goings from Jim's house. In particular, she saw enough of him entering and exiting through the basement door. Jim was wearing his usual workout shorts and a t-shirt. He put on his sneakers and escorted Sam to her house around the corner. She was also wearing workout shorts and a t-shirt, flip-flops. Jim was easily able to unclog the drain on her kitchen sink using her wrench and tape. She stood over him while he was under the sink. He could see her pretty legs all the way to the top. When Jim finished installing the trap back, he slid out from under the sink. He looked at Sam and said, "When we first met, I believe you told me that your father was a plumber." Sam smiled at him. She said, "I wanted to see you, on your back. I see you like watching. I thought you might like it." Jim noticed that she was now barefoot. She said softly, "I want it. I usually get what I want from guys. Come with me and take off your shorts." She turned around, pulled her shorts to the ground, and walked away from him, swaying her hips from side to side. Jim stood up, dropped his shorts and boxers, took off his t-shirt, and followed her upstairs. When they arrived in her bedroom, she turned around and took off her t-shirt. Jim later thought that he should have thought about his own marital status, but at that moment, there was no such thought in his head. As Jim and she got dressed again, Sam said, "I see you walking back and forth through the back door. I can see across the yards, and I saw the bed being delivered there. I wonder if it's comfortable." Jim replied, "Yes, you'll have to try it." She frowned. "As you heard, I can be loud. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to throw it in her face, but maybe I'd like to stay in touch." Jim went back into his house through the back door and took a shower. Then he sat down and thought about it all. He was always aware of the mutual attraction between Sam and himself, but the juxtaposition of her obvious seductiveness and his problems with Tori was unsettling. He put these thoughts aside and got up to review some supplier contracts until it was time to cook dinner. He prepared pork chops and salad for 2. When Tori arrived, he lit the grill and said, "Dinner in 20. Would you like something to drink?" Tori said, "Sure. Maybe red, you choose." He poured her a mixed California wine. They had dinner on the patio. He asked her about work. She talked about the new project, nothing about Alex. She made it clear without being too obvious. He said, "I'm working on expanding the business. The ideas came while I was at the cabin, away from our problems." Our problems. She gave him a brief explanation about potentially opening a shop in Detroit. He didn't go into detail about financing or other specifics. Tori helped him tidy up and clean up. They finished their wine and each went to their rooms to sleep. The evening strengthened Jim's thoughts about Sam. Tori didn't question his apparent change in mood. She also didn't mention divorce. A couple of times, she glanced at Sam's house, but Sam was not on the street. In fact, Sam wasn't home either. She was on a date with a guy who she considered a long-term project. He was wealthy, although of short stature, a little thick too, but Horace was a pleasant man. Sam's divorce was due to her husband's repeated infidelity. She had a great time with Jim and was looking forward to continuing to serve her neighbor if things developed further. Over the next few days, Sam and Jim had marathon sessions every morning for about 3 hours. Sam found it exciting. Jim was a little tired when he arrived for his 3rd counseling session with Mary. Tori was already sitting in her chair. Jim sat down. Mary and Tori looked at him and said nothing. Finally, he said, "I understand that you arranged this, Tori. Thank you very much." He wasn't being sarcastic. Mary asked, "What?" But Jim was in no mood to be ambiguous. He said, "You know what, Mary? Be honest." Tori said, "We both thought it would be good for you. It was, wasn't it?" Jim said, "Absolutely. So good I'll never forget this as long as I live." He looked at Tori. Anger flashed across her face. Jim grinned. Mary said, "Don't be mean, Jim, but understand that Tori made the sacrifice." He nodded. "I saw it. There's a big difference, though." Tori chimed in, "Yeah, you've done it every day this week. The difference is that I didn't want you to cheat, but you arranged for me because you cheated." Tori was confused. She said, "I didn't like it, Jim. Was she better than me?" Jim was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. He shrugged. Mary said, "Jim, this shows how much Tori wants to move past what happened." Jim nodded. "Yes, I can see it, and maybe it will work in a few weeks." He started giggling. Tori snorted. "I'll call her off." He smiled. "You can't. I'm winding her up." Tori sank into her chair. Then she stood up and said, "Okay, she gets the days and I get the nights. I need it, damn it." Jim growled, "You're beautiful and hot. You can have anyone." Tori said, "I can, but I want you. I love you. I only want you." When they had calmed down, Mary said, "I'd like to schedule a session for both of you in about 2 weeks to see what happened." Tori and Jim arrived home in their separate cars. It was Thursday afternoon. Jim was going to the cabin for the weekend and had no intention of canceling those plans. He felt it was important to leave. He stayed there until Monday afternoon. During a weekend at the lake, Tori and Sam talked about Jim at Sam's house. Tori said, "I think your involvement may now end." Sam smiled and said, "My boyfriend Horace is short and chubby but rich and sweet. Jim is not short and chubby, and he has real talent, as you know. So being invited, why should I leave?" Tori said, Because I want to try to stitch a marriage together, see if it lasts, and you're a complication." "I wasn't a complication when you asked." "No, it helped a lot, but you obviously got a lot out of it too." "He's my husband, not yours. Maybe I could win him over." Tori's tone became dangerous. "You really don't want this." Sam said, "Oh, okay. Can we split it up over time? I won't try to keep it, but I'd like to finish it gradually." Tori didn't believe it. She said, "You can go out and get any guy you want." Sam's response was, "So can you. I'll take care of Jim for you." Tori thought about it. She said, "I want my family back. Okay, I want Monday night all night, then I'll stop. I'll knock on his door after dinner Tuesday." "You can knock." Tori agreed. When they parted, she said, "Just don't get pregnant." Sam said, "Horace is a backup option, but I won't." Jim returned home on Monday afternoon. In fact, he was able to do a lot of business planning on Sunday at the cabin. That weekend, he made an offer to buy the place. It would be a good retreat for thinking through major business decisions. He ordered pizza for dinner that night. Tori was kind of depressed, so he left it like that and went downstairs. At 11 in the evening, there was a quiet knock on his basement door. It was Sam. She said, "This is our last time all night long. Let's have fun." She was wearing a short, shameless dress and nothing else. They really had fun, loudly so Tori could hear. Jim thought it was only fair, but something unexpected happened that night. As Sam lay in his arms afterward, she said quietly, "You know, I broke up with Horace yesterday." Jim was surprised. "Why?" "Because I realized I don't want to be anybody's backup plan anymore. And I don't think you should be either." Jim looked at her in the dim light of the basement room. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should both stop pretending this is just physical. Maybe we should see what this could be if we gave it a real chance." The next morning, instead of Sam leaving early as planned, she stayed for breakfast. When Tori came down to the kitchen and saw Sam sitting at the table in one of Jim's t-shirts, drinking coffee, the reality of the situation hit her like a freight train. "What is this?" Tori asked, her voice barely controlled. Jim looked up from the stove where he was making eggs. Tori, we need to talk. About what? About your girlfriend having breakfast in our kitchen. Sam stood up. I should go. No, Jim said firmly. Stay. Tori, sit down. I will not sit down in my own kitchen and… It's not your kitchen anymore, Jim interrupted. You made your choice in Detroit. I'm making mine now. Tori stared at him. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Sam and we're gonna see where this goes. You and I are done, Tori. We've been done since you chose Alex over our family. But Alex is gone. He disappeared. He was nothing. Maybe. But that doesn't change what you did. That doesn't change that you wanted him more than you wanted our family. More than you wanted me. Meanwhile, what Tori didn't know was that Alex hadn't just disappeared. He had been systematically destroyed. Jim's business network had worked with surgical precision to dismantle Alex's empire. The final blow had come when Jim's friend at the bank, armed with detailed financial intelligence about Alex's shaky situation, had called in his loans at exactly the moment when Alex was most vulnerable. Faced with immediate bankruptcy and potential criminal charges for fraudulent financial statements, Alex had liquidated what little he could and fled the country. Security footage from O'Hare Airport showed him boarding a flight to Mexico City under an assumed name, carrying only a single suitcase. Sam quietly gathered her things. I'll call you later, she said to Jim, kissing him gently on the cheek before leaving. Tori watched her go, then turned back to Jim. So that's it? You're throwing away 20 years for some nurse. I'm not throwing away anything. You already did that. Sam just helped me realize that I deserve to be someone's first choice. And she deserves the same. Over the next few months, the divorce proceedings moved forward. Jim's satisfaction at Alex's destruction had provided him with a sense of closure that allowed him to move forward emotionally. He had proven to himself that actions have consequences, and that he was not a man to be taken lightly. The mystery of Alex's disappearance became clearer when investigators discovered that his construction company had been facing severe financial difficulties, though they never uncovered the systematic campaign that had accelerated his downfall. The case was eventually closed as a voluntary disappearance related to financial troubles. For Tori, the news was devastating in a way she hadn't expected. The man she had risked everything for had turned out to be nothing more than a fraud and a coward. All the passion, all the desire, all the fantasies, they had been for someone who didn't even exist. But for Jim, Alex's cowardice was simply confirmation that he had been right all along. The man wasn't worth the destruction he had caused, but justice had been served nonetheless. The divorce was finalized 8 months after that night in Detroit. Jim bought out Tori's share of the house and kept custody of Tyler, who was finishing his senior year. Emma continued to split her time between both parents during college breaks. Sam moved in gradually. First, she started staying over most nights. Then she moved some clothes into the master bedroom. Finally, 6 months after the divorce was final, she officially moved in with her daughter Velma. The transition wasn't without its challenges. Velma had to adjust to a new school district, and Tyler had to adjust to sharing his space. But Jim found that his new life had a lightness to it that he hadn't felt in years. Sam laughed at his jokes, supported his business decisions, and never once made him feel like he was competing with the memory of another man. Tori threw herself into her work. She made partner at the firm within a year of the divorce, the youngest woman ever to achieve that position. She dated occasionally but never seriously. She told herself she was focusing on her career, but the truth was simpler. She had learned the hard way that some choices can't be undone. 2 years after the divorce was final, Jim and Sam got engaged. It was a small ceremony by the lake at Jim's cabin, with just their children and close friends present. Tyler served as Jim's best man, and Velma was Sam's maid of honor. Emma came with her college boyfriend and seemed genuinely happy for her father. Dr. Mary Stevens attended the wedding as a friend. She had continued working with the family through the transition, helping Tyler and Emma adjust to their new reality. Her presence felt natural and welcome. Tori heard about the engagement through Tyler. She was sitting in her office late on a Friday night, reviewing contracts for a new client, when he called. "Are you okay, Mom?" Tyler asked after telling her the news. Tori looked out her window at the lights of Chicago stretching toward the lake. "I'm fine, honey. I'm happy for him. For them." And surprisingly, she meant it. It had taken her a long time to understand that loving someone sometimes means letting them go. Jim had found happiness with someone who chose him first, every day. Sam had found stability and love with a man who appreciated her for who she was, not as a consolation prize. The wedding was beautiful. Jim looked relaxed and happy in a way Tori hadn't seen in years. Sam was radiant, and it was clear she adored Jim. Velma, now 9, was excited to officially become part of the Sullivan family. Tyler was thriving in college and had brought his girlfriend, who fit seamlessly into the celebration. During the reception, Tori found herself standing alone by the lake, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Dr. Mary Stevens. "Beautiful evening," Mary said gently. "It is," Tori agreed. "Thank you for coming. I know it means a lot to Tyler and Emma. How are you doing, really?" Tori considered the question. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I've learned to live with my choices." Mary nodded. "That's all any of us can do." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a pair of loons swim across the lake. "Do you have any regrets?" Mary asked. Tori thought about it seriously. "About the choices I made? Many. About how things turned out." She looked back toward the reception, where Jim was dancing with Sam while Tyler spun his girlfriend around nearby. Velma was teaching some younger cousins a card game, and Emma was laughing with some college friends. "No," she said finally. "No regrets about how things turned out. Everyone got what they needed, even if it wasn't what they originally thought they wanted." As the evening wound down and the celebration continued around the lake, Tori realized that some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. The weight of her choices would always be with her, but she was finally ready to carry it forward into whatever came next. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.